I always believed betrayal would come with shouting, but it came with laughter instead. Cheers to new beginnings, my daughter-in-law chirped, raising her glass like she hadn't just insulted me in front of everyone. The silverware clinked awkwardly. I sat at the head of the table, my table, with the oxygen tube hissing beside me, loud and loyal. She leaned in across the table, eyes sparkling with fake charm. You can't even stand, Dad. How are you supposed to manage a house worth $6 million? Laughter followed, not the good kind, not the kind that warms. My son chuckled. She's not wrong, you know. You've been struggling, Dad. We've been thinking maybe it's time we take the burden off your hands. Burden, that's what I'd become. A fragile, wheezing burden in his own home. I forced a smile. My hand clenched under the table. I counted the seconds between each breath. I wouldn't give them the scene they were hopping for. Is that what I am now? I said quietly. A deed waiting for a death certificate. She laughed again, pouring herself more wine. Don't be so dramatic. We're just thinking ahead. You raised us to plan, didn't you? He nodded. You always told me to prepare for the future. That's all this is. No one looked at me, not directly, like I was already fatting a shadow in the room. The silence dragged. Even the air felt heavier. I looked down at my plate, untouched. The roast chicken they made tasted like resentment. I took a breath and looked up. When your mother died, I promised her I'd keep this family together, that I'd protect what we built, but I think I misunderstood what needed protecting. My son shifted uncomfortably. Dad, don't make this into something it's not. I leaned back. The hiss of my oxygen tank was the only reply I gave. It had been a good table once. This very one. My wife and I built it the year we paid off the house. She carved our initials underneath the leg when she thought I wasn't looking. But tonight that table had turned into a stage, and I was the joke. Later, after they went to bed, I sat alone in the living room. I stared at the fire that no longer warmed anything. My cane rested beside me. My chest ached, not from the illness but from the shame. I pulled the small voice recorder from the drawer. I'd bought it months ago, just in case the paranoia wasn't paranoia. I clicked it on and spoke softly, steady. This is Frank Calhoun, age 81, former combat medic, father, widower, and apparently disposable. I paused. If anyone's listening, don't make the mistake I did. Don't ignore the signs when your family starts treating your breath like a countdown. I clicked it off. Then I gripped my cane, stood slowly, and walked to the front window. The moonlight poured through the glass, lighting up the hardwood floors I laid with my own 2 hands. And in that silence, I whispered to no one at all. I may not be able to run, but I can still stand. They say the first theft in a family isn't money, it's trust. The next morning, I shuffled down the hallway toward my study. Hopping a night's sleep had softened what I'd heard at dinner. I reached for the doorknob, it didn't turn. Locked. My hand froze on the brass. That door hadn't been locked since Ruth passed. I turned back into the living room where my son sat, feet up on my coffee table, sipping from the mug I used to drink from every morning. Did you lock the study? I asked, keeping my tone calm. He looked up, all casual charm. Oh yeah, must've. We were tidying up yesterday, probably just misplaced the key. He didn't meet my eyes. I didn't push, I just nodded. Let me know when you find it. He waved a hand, already returning to his phone. Sure thing, Dad. I stood there longer than I should have, studying his posture, too relaxed, too rehearsed. The study held everything that mattered. Ruth's original will, our trust documents, the deed to the house, my Purple Heart, my journals, things you only lock away if you plan to steal them. I spent the rest of the day pretending to nap, pretending to read, pretending not to notice when my daughter-in-law passed by the study with a stack of folders she hadn't had the day before. That evening I sat in my bedroom, light off, oxygen tank hissing softly beside me. Through the thin wall, I heard her voice, muffled but clear enough. "He's old, not blind. You shouldn't have left the folder on the desk." My son whispered back, but the words were sharper than he meant them to be. "It's not a big deal. Once he signs what we give him, it's done." She laughed. "Liquidating assets, finally. It's like the house is already halfway ours." Every word landed like a hammer. Liquidating assets, my assets. I gripped the arms of the chair so hard my knuckles went pale. Not from anger, not yet, but from grief. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was strategy. I stood and walked slowly to my dresser. In the top drawer, hidden beneath an old pack of hearing aid batteries and Ruth's church bulletins, was a small voice recorder I'd bought months ago, just in case. I clicked it on. Entry 1, October 14th, 8:42 p.m. I am documenting the behavior of my son and daughter-in-law. The study is locked. They're speaking about legal documents I haven't authorized. They're planning something. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I tucked the recorder under my pillow. Later that night, I passed the study again. I leaned my head against the door, eyes closed. I could hear them again, papers shifting, low muttering, the occasional snicker. Betrayal doesn't start with broken glass or raised fists. It starts with missing keys, with locked drawers, with silence. I pressed my hand flat against the door. Let them rewrite the script behind that door. I'd be writing my own, one breath, one lie, one recording at a time. Because the only thing more dangerous than a forgotten old man is one who remembers everything. Sometimes salvation doesn't knock. It just rings once and waits in silence. I noticed the blinking light on my old flip phone after midnight. Missed call, one voicemail, no name. I played it on speaker, sitting alone in the kitchen. "Still breathing, old man," the voice said, gravelly and sharp. "Call me when they start treating you like a ghost." I froze. Helen. I hadn't heard her voice in over 7 years. She used to chair the legal panel at our veterans group, took down corrupt landlords and forged power of attorney scams like a prosecutor on borrowed time. She always said the world had too many wolves and not enough witnesses. I hit redial before I could overthink it. The line rang once. "Well, damn," she answered. "Thought I'd left that message for a memory." "It reached someone real," I said. She didn't ask how I was, she knew. "Is it the kids?" "Not kids anymore, just vultures with my last name." Silence filled the line, not awkward, just full. I told her about the lock study, about the missing key, the laughter through the walls. I didn't cry, but my voice cracked more than once. "You got recordings?" she asked. "Started last night." "Good, paper and proof. That's how we win. Not with anger. You can't fight them angry, you fight them prepared." I stared down the hallway, past the cracked door where their shadows moved like trespassers. "I haven't stood in weeks," I said. "Not really." Helen grunted. "You stood when you called me, that counts." I took a shaky breath. "I need help, Helen." "You got it." She didn't offer pity, she offered a plan. That call lasted 58 minutes. I spoke for 12, she spoke for 10, the rest was silence. But in that silence, something settled in my chest, something heavier than fear, steadier than rage. That night, I sat at my desk and opened the old safe under the floorboard, not the one they emptied. The real one. The one Ruth never knew about, because back then I was a man who planned for storms that hadn't come yet. Inside, scans of every legal document. Ruth's original handwritten will. Copies of our trust before the lawyers my son hired changed the wording. Birth certificates. Military discharge. Power of attorney I never signed. I backed it all up. Flash drives, encrypted folders, labeled copies in plain brown envelopes. Then I opened the recorder and added my voice. Entry 2, October 15th, 1:27 a.m., phone call with Helen Masters, confirmed plan to retain legal support, copies of documentation secure, family unaware. I paused, then added, "They think I'm sitting still, but I've never been more awake." I placed the drive in the drawer, right under the Bible Ruth left on my nightstand. Her bookmark was still tucked in the Psalms. Though I didn't open it, I touched the cover and whispered, "Just watch. I'm not done yet." From down the hall, I heard her laugh again. The daughter-in-law, that high, hollow tone that always ends with a smirk. Let her laugh. I'd let the wolves come close. But this time, I'd be the one holding the leash. I didn't expect to see her so soon. The next morning, the doorbell rang just as the kettle started to whistle. When I opened the door, Helen stood there, silver braid coiled tight, dark coat pressed, eyes cutting through the morning fog like she owned it. "Coffee?" I asked. She smirked, "Only if it's strong enough to wake the dead." Behind me, I heard the familiar click of heels. My daughter-in-law's voice floated down the hall, sugary and sharp. "Oh, is this the nurse?" Helen didn't even flinch. "Let's call me that," she said coolly. "But I don't make house calls, I make cases." The woman blinked, confused, then turned and walked away. I caught the twitch of Helen's smile. We went out to the garden. Ruth's roses had withered, but the air still smelled faintly of her lavender soap. I sat down slowly on the old bench, the oxygen tank humming beside me. Helen stayed standing, always in control. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did, the laughter, the locked door, the whispers about liquidating assets. When I finished, she crouched in front of me, elbows on her knees. "They're not just planning," she said. "They're building a case, one they want finished before you're gone." I clenched my fists. "Then what do we do?" Her eyes flicked down to my trembling hands. "We build ours while you're still standing." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a yellow notepad. "I'll need everything. Flash drives, old copies, financials, medical files. Anything they could twist." "Medical?" I asked. "They'll claim mental decline," she said. "They always do." I stared at her, remembering my son's smirk, his wife's snide comments about me forgetting things. Helen stood, dusting off her coat. "I'll return tonight. Keep your phone on. Don't confront them." I nodded. That's never been my mistake. By evening, the sky turned the color of smoke. I sat in my chair near the hall, lights off, door cracked open, the same way I used to wait for movement during patrols overseas. Then I heard it, the faint creak of the study door, whispered voices, paper sliding. My son's voice low. "Sign this one. His name's already on file. He'll never notice one signature." Her reply smug, certain. "He'll notice when it's too late." I pressed record. Every word, every scrape of paper, every proof of their quiet theft. When the house went silent again, I waited another hour before calling Helen. "They forged a signature," I said. "I know," she replied. "Your son emailed the bank while we were talking this morning. I intercepted it. He's sloppy." My throat tightened. "So what now?" She exhaled slowly like a general plotting routes on a map. "Now we gather everything. The more they move, the more they hang themselves. You do nothing, you breathe. Let them feel safe. I'll be watching." I leaned back in the dark, the glow of my phone screen faint against my hand. For the first time in months, my breath didn't tremble. They thought they were writing the end of my story. But by midnight, Helen had the evidence. And I had their voices, confessing in my own house. In the reflection of the window, I saw myself clearly for the first time in years. Old, tired, but not beaten. Just waiting. The morning they left, my son patted my shoulder like a caretaker, not a child. "Weekend wellness retreat," he said, slinging his duffel over his shoulder. "Just a reset. You'll be fine here, right?" I nodded slowly. "Don't forget your yoga mat." My daughter-in-law kissed the air near my cheek. "Try to rest, okay? You've been so tense lately." The front door closed behind them. I waited, 42 minutes to be exact, then I moved. The rain gutter creaked under my weight as I reached for the hidden spare key. Same spot for 30 years, never once touched. The study door opened with a tired groan. The air inside felt too clean, too touched. I crossed to the bookshelf, slid it aside, and bent down. My knees complained, but I didn't. The safe was already open. I knew before I pulled the handle, but I looked anyway. Empty. No deed, no trust paperwork, no power of attorney. Even the photo of Ruth was gone. My breath hitched, not from shock, from memory. There had been a time I would have panicked, shouted, marched out into the world demanding justice, but not anymore. Now I just moved slower and sharper. I crossed the room, dropped to one knee under the desk, and pulled at the corner of the baseboard. A soft pop. The secret panel I'd built in '92 opened just like I remembered. Inside, 3 flash drives, a manila folder, my original discharge letter, Ruth's handwritten will, scans, notarized copies, audio recordings. Proof. I laid it all out on the desk, checked for any damage. Everything was intact. Every document timestamped, backed up, untouched. I picked up the phone and called Helen. They opened the safe, I said. Anything left? Just air and fingerprints. She didn't miss a beat, and the real stash. In my hand. She exhaled a laugh. They robbed a vault, Frank, but they left the cameras running. I smiled faintly. Then let's develop the film. She gave me a list. Scan everything again. Send copies to the new drive I dropped in your mailbox yesterday. No one touches the originals, and whatever you do, don't confront them. Wouldn't dream of it, I said. But I was already dreaming of the look on his face. That night they returned earlier than expected, luggage lighter, smiles tighter. My son walked in like he owned the walls. We cleaned the study for you, he said, cleared out some of the old junk. I nodded, how thoughtful. He glanced at me, trying to read my face. It was mostly clutter. You probably didn't even remember what was in there. I tilted my head. You're right, I do forget things now and then. He relaxed too soon. I smiled, the kind of smile I hadn't used since I wore a uniform. But not everything. He chuckled nervously. You're cryptic tonight. Just tired, I said, rising slowly. Too much dust in the air. He turned to unpack. I watched him move. He didn't know, not yet. But he would. Because the safe might have been empty. But the house was full of eyes. The folder came in a plain envelope. No label, no flair, just truth. Helen called it the flashback folder. Inside were pieces of my life, some I'd forgotten, others I'd buried. Scanned photographs from my deployment days. A grainy image of me and Ruth, sitting on the hood of our first car. Letters in her handwriting, curvy and stubborn, marked with coffee stains and dried tears. But beneath the memories were the transcriptions. Helen had typed up every audio clip I'd recorded over the last month, every word whispered through the walls, every plan discussed behind locked doors. I sat at the table and read them all. Page 6, he's fatting. Once he's gone, we'll finally be free. My son's voice, cold, certain, like I was a task to complete, not a man to remember. I didn't flinch, not this time. I read it again, slower. Once he's gone. They didn't want to bury me. They wanted to erase me. I closed the folder and stared at my reflection in the dark window. The man looking back didn't look faded. He looked unfinished. Later that night, I pulled open the drawer in Ruth's old desk. The wood still smelled faintly of lemon oil and lavender. I found the phone I hadn't used in years, the one she kept for voicemail messages when I was deployed. I charged it, waited. Then played the last message she ever left me. Static crackled, followed by her voice soft, frayed around the edges. Frank, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. I know how quiet the house must feel, but don't let them forget who you are. You're not just this house. You're the man who built it, brick by brick, day by day. I sat perfectly still, not blinking, not breathing, just listening. The oxygen tank hissed beside me, steady and slow. When the message ended, I stayed seated, for a long time. Then I stood up, walked to the fireplace, and looked at the framed photo of our family. Ruth's smile frozen in warmth. My son, just 13. I lifted the frame down and set it face down on the mantel. In its place, I mounted my Purple Heart. The metal caught the light, simple, heavy, unmistakable. That wasn't decoration. That was survival, earned in blood and grit and nights colder than any betrayal. My breath came slower now, not from weakness but control. They thought I was fatting. But I was. I was sharpening. I texted Helen, "I'm ready." Her reply came quick, "Then it's time they see who you really are." I sat back in Ruth's old armchair, the metal glinting above the fireplace, and closed my eyes. Not to sleep. To remember the man I used to be, and the one I was about to become again. Some meetings don't need fanfare, just purpose. The VA center was quiet that morning. Morning light filtered through dusty windows and landed on worn chairs filled with people who knew how to lose. I sat in the waiting area with a folder on my lap and Ruth's voice in my chest. The foundation director walked in, pressed shirt, clean shoes, and the kind of stillness behind his eyes that only comes from personal grief. He extended his hand. "Mr. Calhoun." "Frank," I said, "no one's called me Mr. since '84. He smiled politely. "Let's talk in my office." We sat across from each other at a metal desk that had seen too many folded flags. I handed him the folder. He flipped through it carefully. "Original deed," he said. "Updated trust transfer notarized, property assessment, inspection reports. You're donating the house." I nodded once, with one condition. He looked up. "Name it." "They don't know, not until it's signed. Not until the ink is dry and the keys are out of reach." He hesitated. "That's unusual." I leaned forward. "So is your home being used as a waiting room for your death?" Silence, then he nodded slowly. "Understood." I stood to leave. He extended his hand again. "This will change lives." I looked him in the eye. "That's the point." Helen filed everything that afternoon. She moved through the paperwork like a surgeon, every clause, every line, every loophole stitched shut. The new trust held the deed now. Not my name, not theirs, just a quiet legal shell under Ruth's initials, RMC Foundation Grant 8. I kept my movements quiet too. When I left the house, I walked further, talked lower, made phone calls from payphones or the back end of the grocery lot. My son noticed, of course he did. One morning he cornered me near the front door. "You've been leaving a lot lately. Everything okay?" "Just stretching my legs," I said. He smiled, but his eyes didn't. "That's good. At your age, movement's important." That afternoon, I saw his car trailing me 2 blocks behind. I led him down Jefferson Avenue, then cut through the alley beside the public library. By the time he made the turn, I was already gone. Let him think he imagined it. Let doubt creep in. That's how you win without lifting a finger, make them question their own certainty. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and listened to him talk to her in hushed tones. "She's hiding something," he said. "He's up to something." "Like what?" she hissed. "He can't even stand without that tank." I smiled to myself and stirred my tea. By the end of the week, the paperwork would be final. The house, the one they plotted over, whispered about, tried to steal with fake smiles and sharpened pens, would belong to men and women who actually knew what sacrifice meant. My family. They wouldn't inherit a thing. Not money, not land, not legacy. Just silence, and the echo of what they could have had if they'd remembered I was still alive. I knew it was a setup the moment I saw the balloons. They'd chosen gold ones, shiny and loud, floating just above the fireplace like they could distract me from what this night really was. Surprise, they all yelled, fake as the plastic tablecloth. My son grinned like a campaign poster. My daughter-in-law kissed the air next to my cheek again. You didn't have to go to all this trouble, I said. Of course we did, she purred. You're turning 81 after all. Milestones deserve celebration. They poured wine, lit candles, served filet mignon I hadn't smelled cooking. I knew exactly which credit card paid for it, mine. The dining room buzzed with polite laughter. My granddaughter looked confused, glancing between her parents and me like she could sense something underneath the surface. Halfway through the meal, my son stood with a wine glass. Let's raise a glass to Dad, he said. May he live long enough to know we'll take care of everything he built. Laughter. I rose slowly, using the table for balance. My hands trembled not from weakness, but from the weight of the moment. That's good, I said, voice steady, because I've already taken care of everything. They blinked, confused. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a thick envelope, the kind that changes everything. This is for you. My son hesitated, then took it. He opened it casually, still smiling. Then I watched that smile collapse, fold in on itself like a dying star. He read the first page, then the second. His lips moved, trying to process the words. My daughter-in-law snatched it from his hand. You gave it to who? She shrieked. You signed it over to a veterans foundation. Gasps around the table, chairs scraped the floor. I adjusted my oxygen mask, slow and deliberate. To people who won't laugh at the man who built it. My granddaughter burst into tears. My son's eyes flared. He stepped forward, fists clenched. You senile old man. He lunged. Before I could move, another voice cut through the air like a gavel. That's assault. Helen stepped forward from the corner of the room, coat folded neatly over one arm, purse still zipped. And I'm his lawyer. You could hear the silence crack in that moment. My son froze mid-step. Helen walked forward, handed him a second copy of the deed transfer and said, I suggest you read the fine print this time. My daughter-in-law tried to speak, but no sound came. Her lips moved, grasping for a script that didn't exist anymore. I turned to my son. You had every chance, I said quietly, to be better than this, to be a man, but you chose greed. He shook his head. You don't get to ruin our lives over a misunderstanding. This wasn't a misunderstanding, I said. It was a mirror. You just didn't like what you saw. I sat back down, heart pounding like a drum. Helen stood beside me, arms crossed. No one ate after that. No one toasted. No one sang. The cake melted slowly on the counter, untouched. And the silence that followed was the sound of everything collapsing. They came dressed for war, dark suits, tight smiles, and a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. My son sat stiff in the courtroom, jaw clenched, eyes avoiding mine. His wife wore all black like she was grieving. Maybe she was. The judge called us forward. Helen stood beside me, calm as ever, briefcase open, everything labeled, everything ready. Their lawyer spoke first. This was an act of coercion. Our client believes Mr. Calhoun is mentally compromised. He's 81, on oxygen, not in a state to make decisions of this magnitude. I stayed silent, eyes fixed on the judge. Helen stood slowly, like a blade being unsheathed. With respect, Your Honor, my client may use oxygen, but he's far more lucid than his children. She handed the court clerk a flash drive. These are audio recordings, Your Honor, taken over a period of 3 months. Verbatim transcripts are included. They show intention, clarity and full awareness of his actions. She turned toward my son. They also show their intention to isolate him, to gain control of his estate, and to erase him before he ever stopped breathing. The judge raised an eyebrow. Is this true? My son stood. I was trying to help him. He's old. We were just organizing. Helen didn't flinch. Organizing? You mean forging documents, misrepresenting power of attorney, calling him a burden over dinner. The judge looked at me. Mr. Calhoun, do you understand the decision you made to donate your property to the Veterans Foundation? I nodded, every word of it. Were you pressured? No, ma'am. I made the choice because I built that house with my hands, and I'd rather see it house strangers who understand dignity than family who laughed at mine. She paused, studying me, then she smiled just slightly. You've been more lucid than your own children, she said. Then the gavel came down. Case dismissed, transfer upheld. It didn't take long for the story to spread. Veteran donates mansion after being mocked by own son. The article went viral. The photo showed me standing on the courthouse steps, Helen beside me. I didn't pose, I just stood. The fallout came fast. My daughter-in-law's school board called it a moral optics issue. She was let go within a week. My son's business lost contracts, clients canceled, his reviews tanked. They called me a monster in private circles, said I was senile, said I'd ruined them. I didn't respond. I just went home, not to the house, but to the one I rented quietly months ago. Modest, simple, quiet. When the veterans moved in, they invited me over. A long table was set in the dining room, same floors I once sanded down on my knees. New voices filled the space. Laughter, no masks. One of the young men pulled out a chair for me. You didn't just give us a roof, sir, he said. You gave us dignity. I nodded, too full to speak. That night as I walked out to the porch, Helen joined me. She lit a cigarette, offered me one. I shook my head. Never smoked, she asked. Quit decades ago, I said. Ruth hated the smell. She smiled, smart woman. The air was still, peaceful. And for the first time in years, I felt it. Not victory, not revenge. Just peace. The cold doesn't sting the same when you've already been through worse. I knelt in the garden where he once played, my son, barely 5, chasing toy soldiers through rose bushes I planted for Ruth. The ground was firm beneath my knees. My hands trembled as I dug, but not from weakness. From memory. The rose bush I brought was small but resilient, just like she was. Ruth loved this corner, said it felt like a place things could begin again. Behind me, I could hear laughter coming from the kitchen window, not cruel, not mocking, but real. The veterans were home. Helen stepped outside, watching from the porch. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. I patted the soil down, one handful at a time. My oxygen tank hissed gently beside me, like slow applause from a quiet crowd. You didn't have to come back here, Helen finally said. I looked up. I did. I needed to bury something. Hatred. I nodded. And guilt. I let them get too close to what I built. I wanted to believe blood meant something. She walked over and crouched beside me. It did, until it didn't. I looked at the house. Fresh paint, new ramp by the porch, American flag waving from the post where my son once hung Halloween ghosts. It looks different, I said. It feels different, she replied. The laughter grew louder, 2 men arguing about who burned the chili. I smiled. They turned it into something better than I ever could. They turned it into something you made possible, Helen corrected. I pulled the last of the dirt into place and set the small placard down beside it, just a bronze plate etched with one line. Ruth's Corner, love is what survives us. I stood slowly, cane in one hand, Helen offering the other. You okay? She asked. Better than I've been in years. We started walking back toward the gate. "Will you ever speak to them again?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I turned back and looked at the house one last time. The porch light flickered on. One of the veterans waved. I lifted my hand in return. "I already said everything I needed to," I said quietly. "In court, in that deed, in silence." We reached the sidewalk. "You think they'll remember you differently now?" Helen asked. I didn't hesitate. "They will," Ruth always said, "make them remember you. And now they will, not as the man they mocked, but as the one they couldn't break." I paused, glancing over my shoulder one last time. "They tried to take my home," I whispered, "but all they did was build my legacy."